The Muckrakers are restless. This is today's News Talk, TNT.
Well, welcome back to the Muckrakers with me, Andrew Eborn, joined yet again by George Szamuely and Martin J. And thank you for all of the brilliant comments all coming through about false flags and Ukraine's involvement and proxy wars and all that sort of stuff. Keep that coming. I do want to look at this nuclear plant and the attack and the suggestion that Zelensky made that it was a false flag. What would Russia have to gain by starting the fire, George?
I don't think it would have anything to gain. I think it's completely nonsensical. I think it's something that Zelensky is putting out, knowing that there are obviously many pockets of Western media that are ready to echo this. And this has already happened. The Guardian, the Politico are repeating without any evidence at all, Zelensky's claims. But absolutely, Russia wouldn't have anything to gain. Now, it may be that Zelensky is planning on seizing the Kursk nuclear power plant. But he's still some way from that. And maybe he thinks that if he gets that they could do some kind of a swap, well, I really give that up in Kursk, and then Russia gives up the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant. He may be thinking that, but first of all, Ukraine has to capture that Kursk nuclear power plant, and I think there still seems to be some way from that. That may be what he's thinking, but I think it's more likely that he's just juggling as many balls in the air as he can, hoping that something or other is going to set things off.
Martin?
Yeah, I think he's right. It is about juggling, isn't it? He's got a lot of balls to juggle, and I think he's looking at all possible options now. Now running up from now until December or the end of November, when we get a result from the US election, it's awkward for him because that particular power plant, from what I understand, it's one of the largest in the world, and so it's quite a prize, and it must be very, very annoying for the Ukrainians that the Russians control it. But it's been closed down. I mean, it's got six of its reactors, I think, are in cool shutdown, or a couple of them are in hot shutdown, which is, I understand, is a partial way of shutting them down. But they're quite difficult to strike because the way the Russians built them. It's an incredibly strong power plant. You can't just bomb it with anything. You need to bomb it with very, very sophisticated, very high-grade, heavy bombing, continuous, just to break through one of them. So some of the scaremongering, isn't actually even relevant. And the IEA are there as well. And we rely very heavily on them to give us more, neutral reporting. They are the ones who confirmed just recently that they were told, the Russians told them that it was a drone attack that created this particular fire, which looked like plastic burning, actually, plastic or tires burning or anything. But the Russians are not also, we shouldn't be so. We should be skeptical also about the Russians. The Russians are also not angels. They're capable of playing with the media as well. And, so we may not find for quite some time what the truth is about the power plant and whether it was actually hit. But I imagine, if I had to put money on it, I would imagine that it's going to be a regular target from now on. I think the Ukrainians are going to hit it whenever they can. And if they have now F-16s buzzing around, and I think George's point about the retired US pilots is absolutely bang on. I mean, I heard a few reports myself of some very discreetly placed advertisements in American pilot magazines, for retired pilots to sign up to a scheme. And I would imagine these are American retired pilots. I can't imagine them being Ukrainian. I've heard from a few sources that I trust very well that there's only actually 6 Ukrainian pilots in Kyiv who are actually able to even be trained. So we have to assume that these American pilots are in the air. And at the moment, I think it's just a PR stunt. You have them buzzing around and you get very good coverage on Twitter. Lots of people are posting videos about these F-16s. And it always looks as though there's more than there actually is. I mean, it could be 2 F-16s which are buzzing around all over the country. And it just looks like, there's dozens of them. But I think so far, when we talk about the power plant, it seems to be a media stunt to me. The real issue of attacks which really do affect the environment. It was more really, we should be talking about the dam which the Russians blew up a few months ago, which did have a huge environmental impact, which did kill people. This power plant isn't really a story, and I think it's used as a tool. And as George quite rightly points out, when you're in Zelensky's position and you have an entire bank of Western journalists from all of the big media guns who are just waiting like little baby sparrows with their mouths open, to be fed the material and to process it in record time and get it out there, then it's hardly surprising that he will spin these stories, and they will get carried away. But I think really, the power plant story is really a media ruse, if nothing else. We shouldn't put too much emphasis on it.
I have to agree with you, and from what I can see, what I love about the Muckrakers is that we try and get as many different experts and talk to as many different people as possible, because I'm just asking the questions. And to me, when you see the optics with all the billowing black smoke, it looks horrendous, and you can see that's going to be the headline. You can see that's going to be reported all over the world. So what I asked our brilliant producer Jeremy to do is to try and find out some engineers and others, people who might be experts at these sort of things. And basically, they're saying there's not a lot of flammable material in a cooling tower. But we managed to find this French engineering professor, Damien Ernst, and he was suggesting it was the packing of the cooling tower that was burning. It's a set of grills of plastic material that separate the water in the tower and activate the contact between the fluids, and therefore the cooling process. By burning them, you get that big black smoke, which is great for the photos, rather similar to burning tires. And the black smoke is very visual for anyone wanting to create panic, just rather like steam, water vapor. And you might recall that a lot of people were saying that these are terrible carbon pollution. They were talking about these particular plants, when effectively what it was just steam. Do you think this is effectively what it is, George? Is it just trying to get the optics, trying to make it look as dramatic as possible?
Yeah, I think so. It's very good news. Get some PR, more evidence of how evil the Russians are. But one thing that is, that isn't getting proper attention is something that I already alluded to earlier, which is the issue with Belarus. Now, Belarus is a small country, small relative to Ukraine. It has a border with Poland, and there have been indications in the past that NATO would regard it as a red line if Belarus got involved in this war against Ukraine, that might trigger a direct NATO intervention. And so I think that this tension that's now brewing on the border between Ukraine and Belarus, I think is driven by, Zelensky's desire to provoke some kind of a reaction from Belarus. I wouldn't be surprised if Zelensky will pull a Kursk-like stunt in Belarus. He invades Belarus, seizes a piece of territory, and then waits for what happens next. And then if Russia is then obligated to come in on because Russia takes its collective security treaty organization obligations seriously. Russia will be obligated to come in and fight on Belarus's behalf. Then he would have to just start taking some serious forces out from the Donbass to liberate any territory. But then you also have to see what's NATO going to do in those cases. It has said that it regards that as a red line. I don't know why it said it, but it did say it, in the past, it regarded somehow Belarus getting involved would be a red line. So I think that's something to look out for, as well as the Kursk. And I agree with Martin. I don't think this the nuclear power plant issue is. I think that's just a smoke screen, so to speak.
Smoke screen.
Yes, a very, very effective smoke screen for some. Martin?
Yeah, the Zaporozhye power plant, I think story is going to stay with us for a few days. You can see that the media are going to run with it, because that picture is so iconic, the black smoke and everything. But George talking about Belarus, that's serious. I mean, that's a really, really different level now of seriousness when we talk about escalation, and that's something that we should really keep an eye on for the long time. But again, I can't help feeling that somebody like Zelensky, who has made such an impact on media through being a clown on television and a comedian and doing everything he's done. He's a guy who I think really does understand media and understands really well how to play it. And in the last couple of days, we've heard stories of him wanting to create a referendum in the country. And, what does that mean? A referendum whereby he asks his own people, how do you feel about us giving up these particular territories in the event of negotiations for peace? And you have to ask yourself, what's that all about? Is he serious about what he's talking about? Is he trying to play the statesman, the so-called, apparently democratically elected president? Because one of the things you've got to understand about Ukraine, and Ukrainians are beginning to think about this more and more, is that Zelensky as a president is losing his credibility. His mandate ran out, God knows when, months ago. And he's in no position and does not want to break away from the martial state, because the moment he does that, then people will say, okay, well, we're not at war anymore, we've got to hold elections. He doesn't want elections. He knows he won't win an election. And so he is now trying to conjure up this image and to present himself as the statesman, as the one who really believes in democracy and pluralism in his own country. And we need to reach out to people and get their opinions on these rather, hot subjects. But the skeptic in me also thinks that perhaps this is another game, another ploy, another ruse that he might play to gain some sort of a ceasefire, because it's only to his advantage. And I think the Russians know this. Russians are not stupid, they're serious people. Zelensky probably is trying to work out a way of getting a ceasefire for a month or two so that he can rearm, he can reposition, he can give his frontline troops a break, they can go back. It's very good for morale. And, one of the things we didn't touch on about Kursk is that the third or fourth scenario that George and I have unraveled is that it's a huge boost for the morale of the troops, of the Ukrainian troops, to have something like Kursk. So that may well have been part of the strategy as well. Other than all of the points we laid out, what a great way of injecting some raw energy into the veins of demoralized soldiers. Where we know that the biggest problem that Zelensky has, the number one problem of scores, the top of the list, is he hasn't got the numbers. He hasn't got the numbers on the infantry. And this is the real desperate point in the war. So, there's lots of smoke and mirrors there to navigate your way through. And I think everything now that we're going to see in the next 6 months should be interpreted with a very, very skeptical slant.
Well, and you make an interesting point that Zelensky has an advantage in keeping the war, because you say he would lose an election, rather similar to what's going on in Gaza and Netanyahu, I think, on that sort of basis. Do you share that view, George?
I do. There is a similarity between the game that Zelensky is playing and the game that Netanyahu is playing, which is you have to pretend to be interested in negotiations. You have to pretend to be interested in a ceasefire. Because otherwise then your patrons get a little embarrassed. And so Netanyahu has been playing this game, we're negotiating with Hamas, we're very close and so on. And of course, he has no interest in this. And so Zelensky puts out these stories that, we're going to have another peace conference, and this time Russia will be invited. And of course, Russia said, well, we're not going to go into any kind of a meaningless conference where we just get attacked and berated by 50 different states. And then, of course, look, it's Russia that isn't interested in peace talks. It's obviously a psychological game, and so that's why he puts out these things like referendum. And again, this is certainly the Trump factor. You have to show Trump that you're serious about negotiations. It doesn't mean you're serious about making any concessions, but you have to show that you are serious about talks. Definitely we're going to have talks. Let's think about a referendum. But there's also the aspect that this operation in Kursk has had a desired effect. More money is being released, and the Americans need to feel, and the Americans are the people who matter here. They need to feel that Ukraine is doing something. It's not just digging in and being pushed out of one village after another. It's actually doing something. It's taking the fight to the Russians. That encourages the Americans that, hey, yeah, this is a good investment. We need to keep this going. Look, they've inflicted a humiliation on Putin. Hey, this is money well spent. This is the way they talk in Washington. Hey, this is money well spent. Look at how many Russians we've killed today. So it's already had that effect, that it's released some money. And of course, Martin's absolutely right. Kursk, because it has the famous connotation of World War II, the greatest battle in world history. For Russians now to be fighting to expel an invader from Kursk, that has definite psychological factors for Russians as well as Ukrainians.
Yeah, so some fascinating points. We sadly have run out of time again. We will be revisiting this. I thought some excellent points about reinstating that raw energy into the troops. And I think the optics on this for the media, we would, as always, urge everybody to question everything. I was fascinated to read those reports from the engineers about what might have caused it. Some people even suggested that Zelensky and his people may have actually dropped some things in there to make it look even more dramatic for the purposes of the media. All that and many more we'll continue to unpack here on the Muckrakers. But for now, Martin Jay and Dr. George Szamuely, thank you very much for joining me, and I will see the rest of you again tomorrow.